almost Pie Day, March 14th. But what could be better than a nutritious pie, one that doesn't pack on the calories and does pack in the good nutrients for your body, especially if, like me, you're trying to lose weight and have better health. So today we're going to make a pizza pie that has an artisan crust, and it's absolutely delicious. You will not miss any of the high-fat things that usually go into a pizza, and I'm making it today for a very special occasion. It's my mother-in-law's birthday tomorrow. So this is worthy of a celebration. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's loaded with nutrients. So we're going to start with 1 1/4 cup of warm water. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of yeast. Now that's a lot more yeast than you would usually use for that much water. But because this is a pizza dough, it's going to act a little bit different than the way that we usually do it, or the way that it usually would act. This is a tablespoon of salt. So you could mix the yeast and the salt together in the same dish, but I wanted to add them separately for your benefit. So I'm going to stir those together in my bowl just a little bit to get the yeast all moistened so it's not all floating on top. And then I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm just going to pour it up the side of the bowl so that it doesn't necessarily blend right in. We want to get that yeast going a little bit before we mix it with the other ingredients. I don't know that it matters, but it's just a habit. And then we want 3 tablespoons of oil, which this also is much more oil than you would use in an ordinary loaf of wheat bread. But you want to get just the right texture in a pizza crust, and so I add more of the olive oil. For pizza crust, you want it to have a lot of stretch. You want it to have a lot of body. So you're going to add 1/3 cup of, well, I will use a 1/3 cup measure just to prove to you that I know how to measure, of vital wheat gluten. And that's going to really enhance it so that it gets a nice stretchy dough. So now those are the kind of the basic ingredients that we'll put to make a nice pizza crust once we add the flour. But I want this pizza crust to be an artisan bread all by itself, not just a vehicle for the other ingredients, but something that people will want to eat the crust just as much as they are enjoying the rest of the pizza. So I'm going to add to my super artisan pizza crust 1/4 cup of shelled pumpkin seeds and 2 teaspoons of chia seeds, or 2 tablespoons rather, of chia seeds. Now the oil is causing those to stick in my spoon a little bit. Couldn't possibly get a fresh measuring spoon. Anyway, then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of roasted, salted sunflower seeds. So that's why I used a little bit less salt to begin with, because I knew I was going to be adding these. And they are a little bit salty, and you don't want it to over salt. I ordinarily would use about 2½ teaspoons of salt in the recipe, and that is salted sunflower seeds, so I didn't do that. So those are all going to make for a really delicious tasting bread. Now it's time to add the flour. Now I used 1 1/4 cups of water, and so that tells me that I will use approximately double that amount of whole wheat flour. This is flour that I ground myself, and this is red wheat flour. Red wheat flour is slightly higher in protein than white wheat flour is, and so it's good for pizza crust because it will develop a greater elasticity. But I tend to prefer the hard white wheat, just because it makes a softer, a little bit softer, a little less grainy product. I'm trying to get this down to a half a cup. It would make sense to use just the half cup measure. So now I've got all of these ingredients. I haven't mixed them at all. I'm going to put them on the mixer and mix them for 5 minutes, just so that they will be well mixed, and then I'll look at the dough and see what the texture is looking like. So I'll show you what that process looks like. So there are the dry ingredients all in there with the wet ingredients. So we'll start this off a little bit fast, and then it should form up into a dough, and then I'm going to slow it down once it starts to get stiff. Okay, I'm going to scrape this down from the sides because there's a little bit of the wet ingredients getting up a little bit high on the sides. Now I'm just going to do it at a slower speed. Okay, this pizza dough has finished mixing and being kneaded by the dough hook, so I'm going to pull it off. Show you what it looks like. The seeds want to kind of shed, but it's a very strong, sturdy dough, and I am going to just let it rest so that some of that gluten kind of relaxes for about 15 minutes. And while the crust is relaxing, I'm going to make the rest of the pizza. So instead of using a traditional sauce, we're going to use this plain non-fat yogurt. And we're going to fancy it up by adding 2 tablespoons of the ranch dressing mix. Now if you already have some of this dip that I showed in another video made, then just go ahead and use that. But this holds up really well on a pizza, as a pizza crust. And if there is leftover, you can always just use it as a vegetable dip. So you can see the consistency of the yogurt is pretty firm, and the ranch dressing mix, this is Hidden Valley brand, will stiffen it up even more because it has ingredients in it that cause the dressing that you add milk to thicken. But I don't want this any wetter than the way it's going to be, just like this. So there's your pizza sauce. Plenty strong enough. I think it could use just a little bit of salt. Just a 1/4 of a teaspoon, well, probably more like 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, just to kind of perk it up a little bit. You could add more mix if you wanted to. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. And I will add that once the pizza is rolled out. But that's ready to go. Now I have 15 minutes. Now's a good time to chop all the ingredients, but we're going to do this a little bit differently. I would never put a raw yellow onion on a pizza because it would overwhelm all the other things and be too strong. Except, in this case, the secret to this kind of a super nutritious pizza tasting really good is the fact that we're going to actually cook the vegetables and the meat beforehand. Of course, when you order a pizza in a restaurant or at a take and bake place, their meats are also already cooked. So there's nothing that earth-shaking in that. So you can see this isn't real fine, but it's kind of a medium chop. That'll be just fine. And I'm just gonna slide it right in there into my non-stick skillet. Scoop these up and put them in there too. Do the same for the mushrooms. But the mushrooms I am not going to add quite at the same time that I'm going to add the other vegetables, because I want them to hold some of their body. So, I am going to add a ton of vegetables, but there's going to be plenty of flavor because I'm going to use some strong cheese also. And that's kind of another secret to eating well when you want to also eat for your health and really have enjoyable foods. Use the really strong flavored hard cheeses like Parmesan, and they will give you a lot more bang for their buck as far as the calories go, because they add the flavor without adding more calories. They've just been cured or been allowed to develop their flavors longer than other softer cheeses. So I guess it's called ripening a cheese. They've been allowed to ripen longer. So the green peppers. So the green peppers go into the skillet. These are canned artichoke hearts. I'm going to chop them. Now, if you've ever eaten a steamed artichoke, you recognize that even though this can says that these are artichoke hearts, you're getting a lot of the leaf in here too. And so you really do kind of need to make sure that those leaves are cut down pretty well, because they're not as tender as the heart itself. If you were actually just going to eat the heart, that's the heart of the artichoke. All of these are leaves, but they're edible. Obviously, they're in the can. So we'll do that. And then I'll finish that can in a minute. In fact, I don't really want all of those artichokes in the skillet while I'm doing the chicken. So this is going to be a chicken pizza. Chop your black olives a little bit, just so that they don't roll around on your pizza. That's the main reason to chop them. Of course, they're already cooked, so it's a pretty coarse chop, so that they will still maintain that they need to be big enough that you can still taste them. So I will just scoop those aside with the other ingredients that are going to be sprinkled on top. Now lastly, I'm going to add some chopped asparagus, which asparagus actually holds up really well and gives a little bit of a crisp punch of texture that is really pleasant. I cut off the woody ends already and soaked these, put the cut ends in some water so that they would be well hydrated. But it looks like some of these are a little bit tough, so I'm going to scoop those off and just use the ones that cut really easily. These do go into the skillet because they need to be cooked a little bit, not too much. Then we chop the chicken. I'm going to heat this up. I added about a tablespoon of olive oil to get this, and have a medium fire under this pan, medium-high fire. And I'm going to just cook these down until they're all a little bit tender. But right now, I'm going to add 2 medium-sized chopped chicken breasts. So they're chunked into about 1-inch chunks. You could do a little smaller if you want to, and I might cut them down a little bit more when I go to spread them on the pizza. So we'll let those get started. Make sure that the chicken all has contact with the pan. For the moment, it's more important that they are cooking than it is that the vegetables are cooking. While the chicken is starting to cook, and you want the chicken to cook all the way through and to be kind of brown, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons generous tablespoons of minced garlic. This is a 1/8 cup measure, and that's just going to perk up this meat. And I'm also going to salt the meat a little bit too. So there's about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to sprinkle it over that meat because you kind of want to season it as you go. Otherwise, you can end up with if the ingredients are bland, the overall product might be bland. And now I'm going to add some black pepper. And you can add already ground pepper, but I think once you start using these pepper grinders, you'll find that they really do give a much nicer flavor to use the freshly ground pepper. So that's a pretty good coating. I'm going to probably is the equivalent of about a 1/2 teaspoon, I would imagine. I'm even going to turn the heat up a little bit because I really want this to get brown and do it quickly, so that the ingredients are ready at the same time that the dough is ready to be rolled out. All right, we're ready to put together this pie. I'm going to start by spraying my pizza pan. You could use a regular cookie sheet, but you're just going to be, whatever it is, it needs to be greased. Doesn't have to be round, except for pie day. You might want to make it round so that you can figure out the diameter and the circumference. Here's the dough. It's risen almost double. You can see it's a very stiff, sturdy dough. And I'm just going to push it out to the edges of this pizza pan until it gets to be filling the pan. If you add a little bit less flour in the mixing stage, you're going to get a softer dough, which might be what you desire. So I would start with a 1/2 cup less flour and see if that forms a nice dough. This one is quite stiff, which is perfectly fine for what I want to do, but it does take a little bit longer to get it pushed out to the edges. You don't really need to use a rolling pin, but you could. And if you're really fancy, you could spin it on your hand and make it fly into the shape of you can spin it like a disc on your hand. But I've been to Italy many times, never seen anyone do that. They actually don't even serve round pizzas very often. In fact, I've never seen a round pizza anywhere in Italy. They cook them on cookie sheets, and then they cut you a square slab, which you fold in half and eat like a sandwich. So you don't have to eat like a sandwich, but that's kind of the typical way. So you're watching this process. There isn't anything particularly cerebral about it. It's just getting it out to the edges. Now I can see that I'm getting a thin spot right there. So I'm going to kind of pinch it back together in the middle, pull some of these fatter spots back to the middle, and then push out the edges because the edges are still thick. You want it pretty uniform. Once it's filling the pan like this is, if you have a smaller rolling pin and want to kind of roll it, you could do that. Just get it a little bit flatter. This pizza pan is big enough that the rolling pin fits within the raised edge, so you can do it that way if it's easier. And it also helps you to identify where the fat spots are. And you roll it a little bit flat. Now you can see the dough is kind of creeping up over the height of the edge, and that's perfectly okay, because we're going to fold it back and give it a little bit of a decorative edge in the end. Well, that's pretty good. Not a precise science, but it is going to be delectable. I promise. Okay, so here is our yogurt mixture. I'm going to pour, I poured about a cup, maybe 9 ounces on there. And I'm going to start with that and just spread it all over the pizza. Might use a spatula, it might be a little easier than the fork. Now I have a thing, I like the sauce to go all the way to the edge of the bread. And so you can do it that way if you want to, or not, but that's my policy, is to get that extra flavor on every part of the crust. Smooth it out so you don't have any pools of it. Now of course this is going to be a very light sauce, but that ranch dressing makes for a very sturdy, a good flavor. So at this stage I'm going to take this sauteed chicken, asparagus, onions, and mushrooms, and green peppers, and just spread it all over this dough. Obviously it's cooled a little bit. It's still warm, but it's cooled enough that I can pick it up. I don't want to scrape out that part that got a little bit overdone in the pan. Just spread this out. This is much more like a real pie than the typical pizza that's just real flat and has cheese and a little bit of pepperoni on it. That's more like cheese bread in my mind. So this is going to have a lot of body to it. This is a can of chopped artichoke hearts, one of my favorite pizza ingredients. Spread those out evenly. It would be a shame to gyp someone eating this pizza if they didn't get any artichoke hearts. And here is the rest of a can of olives. There was a few in the saute mixture already because I didn't worry about separating the mushrooms when I added them at the very last. Okay, so last of all, we'll add some spinach, just here and there. Not a ton of spinach. You want to be a little bit careful with the spinach because it's going to be wet. It's going to add a layer of moisture. That's why I'm doing it on the top, because it will dry out first, but it will keep the other ingredients from drying out. Here we have 5 ounces of mozzarella cheese that's been grated. And I'm using precisely 5 ounces because I'm trying to control the calories, and I want to be able to calculate the calories at the end of the recipe. So I weighed the cheese before I grated it, so I would know pretty precisely how many calories I'm getting from cheese. And 5 ounces is enough to give a nice coating all over the pizza. Then I'm going, here is some grated Parmesan cheese, and you can use the stuff that comes out of the can. That actually is fine for adding flavor, but if you think to buy this, or if you keep it on hand, this is kind of a special touch because it's so flavorful and it melts really well. The cheese melts really well on the pizza when it's in this form. But I want to add 4 ounces of the grated Parmesan cheese. So I will zero out my scale. right up to 4 ounces. So you can see that's almost a cup. In fact, it might be a cup of Parmesan cheese. And you're going to sprinkle that over the top of the mozzarella cheese so that you have a very, very flavorful pizza, much more than what you're ordinarily going to get from one of these white pizzas, and yet the calories are not that high. The mozzarella cheese has the oven. I will bake it at 375 for 20 minutes, and then I will check the underside of the crust and see if it's cooked through the bottom. And I expect it to take about 25 minutes total, but I'm going to check it at 20 minutes. So I'll show you what it looks like and take a bite in your behalf once it's baked. Well, this looks like a guaranteed lovely pie day. But I'm going to cut it now into 8 slices. I have figured out that 1/8 of this pie has 480 calories, and that is including the extra seeds and all of the ingredients that I put on here. So 1/8 of a pie this size is going to be a hearty meal, which with a regular restaurant pizza recipe, you'll be surprised if you calculate out the calories, it is going to be much higher. This is also high in all kinds of vitamins, protein, as well as fiber. Oh, I can feel it crisp under the pizza cutter, and it just smells divine. This looks like a likely slice right here. Oops. Well, I'm going to just take one bite, just because I know you want to know if it turned out as well as it looks. It's still pretty hot though. And it's so heavy, I don't know that I could really pick it up with my fingers. Well, you're going to have to try it yourself. It is truly fantastic. Worth every single calorie. Happy Pie Day, and thanks for watching.